external headwinds shaping the outlook, we are honored to have with us an expert who will guide us through this perspective.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi. Terima kasih kepada Bahagian Datuk dan warga PKNS lah kerana mengundang saya pagi ini untuk memberi sedikit pembentangan tentang situasi ekonomi negara lah. Ada clicker untuk saya? Okey. Baik, terima kasih. Seterusnya dengan izin, saya guna bahasa dalam Dewan, dalam Parlimen untuk meneruskan pembentangan saya pada pagi ini dalam bahasa Inggeris, bahasa penjajah. Maaf. So, my presentation this morning ni typically is something that I do for the likes of fund managers, orang yang urus money untuk invest dalam pasaran saham, dalam pasaran bond, pasaran mata wang. Jadi, maybe it's a bit technical in certain aspect, but I'll try to do this in a manner of perhaps storytelling sikit lah, kalau boleh. I think from the perspective of the economy right now, I would consider our economy ni in a way domestically okay, resilient. Of course, if you ask different people, they have different story lah about the situation. That's the fact. And nobody is on the same boat, so to speak. Orang kata apa? Different people, different strokes. It is what it is in reality. But I think overall, the domestic economic situation serve as an anchor, like the anchor of a ship that is currently in a very choppy seawater. So that provide the stability, because external environment right now memang very volatile, very uncertain. I think maybe I start with showing the most recent performance of our economy in terms of growth. Third quarter was actually, I guess, good news for the government. Economy actually pick up 5.2%. First 6 months of this year, steady at around 4.4%. But overall, I think first 9 months of this year, our economic growth is a bit down from 5.1% last year. But I have to say it's not as bad as initially feared. I think, especially after November 2024, after the US presidential election, unfortunately, we have to deal with Trump. I call it Trump 2.0. There's a lot of uncertainty about what Trump going to do. And to me, Trump is a person with unfinished business. Dia tak dapat habiskan second term dia, dia sangkut sikit. Dia 4 tahun je satu term, lepas tu dia kalah to Joe Biden. And then, well, he won again. So I think he has an unfinished business. Dia tak sempat buat. Mungkin for him, I need for 8 years to do it, but I only got first term, 4 years. Second term, 4 years, memang I expect him to go all out. All out in terms of his policy, especially with regards to trade. That's why later on I will discuss a bit about what he has done, and there are things that we have to put up with as a result of Trump 2.0 situation. But we are looking at economic growth this year to be decent at 4.7%. So I guess 9-month performance should reflect full year. There's not expected to be any big change in the final 3 months of 2025. Next year, we expect growth to ease a bit to 4.5%, which to me is still a pretty respectable rate of growth. I think we are an economy that is so much larger in size now. Our economy size is easily 2 trillion ringgit. When I joined as an economist, a very junior economist at Bank Negara in 1993, our economy can grow 8-9% easily, but the base was small. I cannot remember the numbers already. It was so long ago, 32 years ago. How time flies. At that time, our economy was booming. It's before the 1998 financial crisis. So I think for us to be able to grow at half that pace, that is good. Because typically for a truly developed, mature economy like in the West or in Japan, for them, if they can grow 2%, 3%, is considered magnificent rate of growth. So as you develop, as your economy become larger and larger, it's not easy to continue clocking very high rate of growth. But I think at 4+%, not far from 5% per annum kind of growth, is a very good achievement considering what we are going through right now. So what enabled this? I think the most important thing is, if you look at a simple graphical representation of what contribute to our economic growth on a quarterly basis since first quarter 2024, you would, I think, notice on this steady growth column of domestic demand. So that is actually the true engine of our economic growth. When it comes to net external demand, which is the difference between export and imports, the trade balance, so to speak, it just go up and down, like yo-yo. It's not a steady driver of economic growth. I think in third quarter, luckily it rebounded because export growth was slightly faster than import growth. But the economy is really, really driven by domestic demand. And the main source of that has been private consumption, consumer spending. Essentially, kita ni yang support ekonomi ni, belanja, beli rumah, beli kereta. Kita anggap benda tu biasa, pergi Aeon, beli barang. But the impact to the economy is very, very important. Very, very critical. Bayangkan ekonomi kita kalau everybody stop or cut spending big time. That would be impactful to the economy in a big way. So that's why you notice dasar kerajaan of late pun, sama ada kerajaan pusat, kerajaan negeri, always trying to support consumer spending, always trying to support consumer income, always trying to provide for the low income group, for the less fortunate, how to support the income so that they can spend, even if unessential. But that continued spending on the economy is vital to keep our economy going. The second big driver now that we notice is investment, especially private investment. So I will tell later why, or what is driving private investment. But public sector also contribute to our economic growth in terms of government spending, government development expenditure. But you notice the trend in the final two columns there, export and imports. They are actually a bit more subdued now. It's coming down. Why? Because of the global uncertainty under Trump 2.0 era. Now, the resilience in consumer spending, I think, is clearly manifested by various indicators. You can call me a nerd or a geek when it comes to numbers. I'm a crazy statistical guy. I love data. To me, data has stories to tell. It's a very important way to understand economy beyond the 36,000 feet view of things. Bila you nak go into detail, you can have the information, you can have the data, you can understand the data, how to interpret the data, and so on. So in the case of trying to understand consumer spending or the real private consumption component of our GDP, one indicator that I follow closely is this monthly indicator on distributive trade index. Dia cover benda-benda macam retail sales, wholesale sales, motor vehicle sales. So this is the indicator really on the ground that shows what our people, businesses are doing in terms of spending. You can see it's a very stable line growing at around 5%. So that explains why our economy is generally domestically stable, because consumer spending is stable rather than going up and down like crazy. Like what happened during COVID, post-COVID, because there was a lot of uncertainty, there was lockdown, you cannot go out, it affect your spending. But once things stabilize, even before COVID, you notice it's always a steady steady pattern. So policy, government, very important to keep this particular component of the economy stable and steady, because at least you know you have a base in terms of growth. Anything above or below is a function of maybe other things. And I think what is interesting about what explains why consumer spending is steady right now is, number one, job market situation has improved. Our unemployment rate now is back to the pre-COVID level, around 3%. There is. I mean, obviously during COVID, it went to as high as, I think, 5+%, very bad. Economy shut down, business collapsed, people lost jobs and all that. But things has recovered in that sense that people are finding jobs again. And again, an interesting indicator that I always follow is EPF contribution. Because the majority of contributors to EPF are workers, you and me. We have that contribution to EPF, and it tells you when it grows, there are two factors driving EPF contribution. Satu is what you call growth in wages and salaries. So if wage and salaries grow, your contribution to EPF, even if it's fixed at 11% for you and 12% for your employer, but it's 11% and 12% of a larger number. So there's wage and salaries increase, contribution to EPF go up. The other one, of course, is the number of people employed also increase. More and more people are employed, so statistically that will also increase or expand the gross contribution to EPF. So EPF right now, every quarter, is getting 10 billion ringgit every quarter since first quarter of this year. So this is a record number. Before this, they never hit or surpassed 30 billion ringgit. So EPF have a good problem, too much money. They nak invest how to get return. Kita semua nak 6% dividend and all that. So they have a good problem. The challenge is to make sure they invest in assets that earn return that will enable them to constantly give people good dividend, which I think should be anywhere between 5 to 6% per year. Bear in mind, by law, EPF cuma patut bayar kita 2.5% saja. That is EPF Act, tapi they give more. So which is good, and people, in my opinion, should not complain too much. The other thing is government is helping citizens and its workforce to support the income. So I think since 2012, the government have come up with this cash handouts. Nama dah tukar banyak kali, started with BRIM. I think now it's STR, campur sara. So I think as far as supporting consumer spending growth, this financial assistance, cash handouts also is important, and we see the number now very high. I mean, it started at 2 billion ringgit aja back in 2012. Now it's 15 billion ringgit per year. So there's a lot of money that is being kind of given by the government to help the lower income group to also ultimately make that money flow into the economy through consumer spending. And of course, this year and next year, the civil servant are getting big revisions in the salaries. So we can see this from the statistics on government emoluments and pensions. Because you must remember, government employees is about 10-11% of workforce. It's not small. So it's a sizable, significant portion of the total workforce and hence consumer base of the economy. And then we look at the trend in private sector wages and salaries also. It's steadily inching up now, growing at around, I think, 3 to 4% on a quarterly basis. And because of that, when you combine everything, this employees' compensation, and you kind of track it with real private consumption expenditure, we see the historical correlation. When it go up, go down, there is impact on consumer spending part of the economy. Consumer spending is 60% of GDP. That is the biggest engine of the economy, and we've got to always support that. Make sure it will continue to provide sort of the base load for the economy to grow. The other thing that we should not also forget, when foreigners come into our country, if they spend in our economy, that also contribute to economic growth, to their consumers, to their spending in our economy. So tourism sector is actually a very important driver of consumer spending and hence economic growth. So that's why we constantly have this every few years. We have Visit Malaysia Year program. The next one would be next year, 2026. I think we saw what happened, the damage done to our economy during COVID, during pandemic. The lockdown means people cannot travel, not only domestically, but we cannot go abroad. People from abroad also cannot come to Malaysia. And the collapse in tourist arrival and visitors arrival hurt the economy big time. Like we saw what happened in 2020. Literally no tourism activity, so to speak. Hancur. And it took a while for this to recover, to rebound back, because we don't simply immediately open the economy. We gradually open the economy, so it takes time. But I think the good thing is by 2024, the tourism industry is pretty much back to its pre-pandemic level in terms of arrivals, whether it's inbound tourist arrivals or visitors arrivals. The visitors arrival is basically tourist arrival campur excursionist. Excursionist ni basically people who are day tripper. Orang Singapore masuk JB on a daily basis, orang dari southern Thailand masuk Kelantan or Kedah or Perlis on a daily basis. They don't stay overnight, at least minimum, so they don't qualify as tourists, but they visit, they come, they also spend in the economy. Of course, yang tak bestnya part of the spending tu dia curi subsidize kita punya minyak around 95 lah kan, but what government is addressing that issue through the subsidy rationalization. So next year, it is expected that tourism growth would drive, would be another engine for consumer spending. And I think what is very interesting, when you look at indicators of tourist spending, benda-benda macam, apa orang kata ni? Foreign credit card spending in Malaysia. Maknanya kalau traveller datang sini, turis, dia bayar bilik hotel ke, dia shopping, dia pakai credit card dia, kita boleh track tu. Ini data yang dihasilkan oleh Bank Negara. Kita tengok, it's going up. And then kita boleh tengok travel receipt, of course, when they come, they spend, whether by cash or the debit card or whatnot in total. I think what is interesting is the amount they spend now is even higher than what it was before COVID. So there's more money actually in circulating in the economy through recovery in tourism activities, such that the chart on this other side here, I give you the tourism share of GDP of exports, because revenue from foreign tourists coming into Malaysia is considered export of services for us. And then as a share of private consumption, it's rising. It's already almost back to what it was in 2019 before COVID. So the full recovery of tourism industry is already there. So we do expect with Visit Malaysia Year 2026 next year, we will go beyond the level that we achieved before the COVID period. The other thing that you keep also hearing, especially with our Prime Minister, dia suka travel overseas. But when he travel overseas, it's not just jalan-jalan kosong. He try to attract investor to come to Malaysia, try to generate potential exports for our businesses. There is this investment upcycle going on in the economy. The readily or high frequency data that is available that I constantly monitor is this thing called investment approvals, which is by MIDA, a subsidiary of MITI. So their job is actually to get to get an approved investment. And I think what is very interesting about this statistic is before COVID, I think you got an average about 180, 190 billion ringgit per year. Post-COVID, the level just go up a lot more. I mean, we're talking about, probably close to like 300 billion ringgit a year kind of approved investment. And the first 9 months of this year is still growing, which is remarkable. And to me, this year should be another bumper year in terms of investment approval. They serve as a lead indicator to actual investment, because obviously we get application and then we get approval. You know, just like when you do your property business, for example, in selling property, you know, you got to get through all the process before things are being built. and then you got to go, and consumer or the purchasers of the property got to go through a whole process of applying for loan before they get the loan approval. Same thing with this investment statistics. And equally impressive is we are seeing a lot more FDI now than before. And I think that can be seen clearly from the chart in the middle here, that split approved investment into FDI, foreign direct investment, and DDI, domestic direct investment. And in terms of breakdown by sectors or industries, I think technology really leads the investment approval, which is not really surprising because I think there's a new catalyst for technology now. It's like everything AI now, data centers and all that. So it's good that we are also part of the game. You know, our technology ecosystem in economy has existed easily 50 years. When we started back in Penang and even in Selangor, I think we just back then producing white goods, you know, fridge, TVs. But I think in my years of doing economic research, I find what is incredible is that we are able to make sure we stay current and relevant with the changes in technology sectors. So from producing, I guess, from today's perspective, very simple, very low value consumer electrical products, we have moved along to get into the supply chain of PCs, when PCs was the in thing. I remember, I mean, when I was at school in late 80s, PC already exists, but it's like a luxury, it's like a very different thing. Masa tu pun pakai disket yang floppy disk, you know, yang I don't know, budak zaman sekarang memang confirm tak tahu punya. And then baru pergi hard disk yang small sikit. Sekarang dah tak ada konsep disk, semua in cloud. But I think that is how technology has evolved. And what is interesting is we are part of it. We are in the supply chain. And I think it's very, very important. Especially when we move into producing and exporting semiconductor, because that's the very important element for a lot of things in technology and electrical now. From smartphones, even the projector that doing this, they need chips too, you know, don't forget that. The chip is not just for phones, just for computers, but a lot of things, electronic goods now have chips in it. So I think now we are on to the next big thing in technology, which is AI. And AI is really about data, a lot of data, processing data, retrieving data, how you make use of data to do your job, to help us with our jobs and our productivity. So data center is the big thing now. And Malaysia is one of the top market in attracting investment in technology through data centers. And I think investment approval, apa semua ni, investment potential is one thing. As an economist, yeah. Yeah.
The orange color to shoot up. Then the 2023-24, the pink color, which is property related, shoots up.
Yes.
Is that the investment in industrial park?
Property related, yes.
More industrial park, because technology has gone up. So there will be probably, assuming technology goes up, probably in industrial park, right?
Property, yes. In the old days, it's mostly approval tend to be residential and commercial, as in office, retail. But I think in recent years, and I think going forward, memang industrial parks would be the key element here. Why? Because investment has gone up. So many companies are coming in to set up shops, set up factories and all that. So we need space for that. And as it is, we are perhaps overbuilt on commercial, office, building and retail. Kita kena clear that stocks first also. And I think that's the, I mean the challenge of the need for commercial and, or for that matter, commercial and industrial buildings to be green as well. They must be ESG compliant, they must have grade A status, you know, they must be energy efficient and all that, because the investors, especially foreign investors, when they come into Malaysia also, they want to make sure they comply with that because it is the requirement or directive from their parent company in Europe, in US, in Japan or whatnot. Because every companies now also want to make sure they are contributing to this net zero carbon decarbonization drive, so on and so forth.
So, in your opinion, in 2024, you got an increase in the technology investment locally. So, meaning that there are more expansion, I guess, of current facilities, and therefore there is a requirement for industrial park. Can that be true?
It is true, because as the local industry themselves also expanding in technology, they also need, I suppose, space and all that. And I think don't forget why technology in local investment also has kind of shot up last year, because government launched the National Semiconductor Strategy. So we want to continue, we want to make sure also that when there's FDI in technology, there's spillover to domestic technology ecosystem as well. So I think it's good that we see the indication, the rise in FDI in technology in the preceding few years are beginning to translate into the rise in domestic direct investment in technology as well. Yeah.
The technology portion is bigger in 2025, 9 months, but the property development, the pink color, is smaller for FDI, but it's increased for DDI. So does it mean that the investor does not keen on to invest in property-related activities in 2025, but mainly focusing on all those servers, all the, I mean, on technology punya materials, but not on property development?
I think it's about the investment that comes in, the foreign, they are not into the property itself, they're into the structures, but they do need to have access to land and whatnot. So I think this is where the local comes in, support in terms of providing. So I give you an example of how interesting the data center dynamic is going on for the past few years. Yeah, you have all these Amazon, Google, ByteDance and whatnot, they come. They need the land. What I find interesting is that our property players, our even plantation companies are thinking that daripada tanam sawit, I can get and make more money doing, or at least allocate or redesignate certain acreage in my land banks to data centers. And there you have seen whether in terms of partnership or whether they just sell to the foreign investors the land, or they sell it to a proper property developer to do this. So that's why you are seeing the pink bar in that approved domestic direct investment is kind of picking up. It's related to what's happening within other parts of DDI as well as what's happening in the FDI. Now the other thing, maybe later also in relation to what's happening globally, there is what I sense since Trump 1.0 and what happened during COVID when everybody experienced the shock of China lockdown, because China is most aggressive when it comes to lockdown. Ada kes 1-2 dia cepat-cepat tutup the area and all that. It affect China's production coming up from China, trade shipment coming up with China, because 20 years before COVID, China has entered into the world trade, world economy, big time. They become the factory of the world. We literally source a lot of things, as much as we send things to China for them to process and re-export to the rest of the world. So I think Trump 1.0 and COVID resulted in a situation, a business feel that there's changing global trade landscape, number one. Number two is over-concentration of your supply chain with China is not a good idea. So what happened is trade and investment diversion, and we are benefiting it in terms of the FDI now. Number two, as a result of that, this trade and investment diversion, of course, they need places, so they come to us. It increases the demand for certain type of property, especially industrial property. And I think within industrial property, besides structures, for those FDI and non-property DDI, there's also increasing need for logistics, warehouse, and all that. So this is as a result of what's happening globally now. And I think what is also important is that things are being implemented. I'm not interested in approval statistics sahaja lah, nak tengok implementation is happening or not. So if you look at MIDA, they track the implementation of the approved investment. Since COVID, it is go back to historic high of 85% that happened during 2001-2005 period. So implementation is happening. Secondly, I do things like follow the money and follow a particular type of imports, which is capital goods. Follow the money because if investment approval is going to be realized, they need money lah. And one of the most simple indicator to me, if you look at banking system loans for industrial buildings, factories and lands. When things are moving, money will move. Very simple. So you see the loan growth for purpose of industrial building, factories and land is surging. And number two, because when factories come in, they set up, they build the structure, they need to obviously equip the plant, the factories with machines, production line and so on. The reality is we are not a producer of capital goods. Kapal terbang pun kita kena import. Kapal pun kita kena import. That is a big thing. What about machine, precision machine and all that? Kita memang kena import, like it or not. So when you monitor imports of capital goods also, it's turning around and growing very fast. And it tracks or it links well with in actual investment statistics. So as long as imports of capital good remain strong, investment activity will be robust. And of course, we have other catalysts. The latest one is Johor Singapore Special Economic Zone. I think obviously Johor MB is very happy. It's 9 months, 2025 investment approval, 90 billion. So they become the top in terms of investment approval by state. Selangor close, probably not so close second, but second is good enough. But I think what is interesting is if you look at the top states and the top foreign direct investors, Johor and Singapore. It's no coincidence, it must be about JSSEZ. So that means JSSEZ is not just a concept, it's not just signing agreement, MOU, things are moving on the ground. So I think this provide another catalyst for investment activities to remain robust and support our economic growth as well. And of course, public sector pun investing in the economy. So you see this from this number where I track not just federal government development expenditure, I look at statutory bodies, state government, local government, NFPEs, which are essentially GLCs, and now GLICs, Government Linked Investment Company, EPF, PNB, Tabung Haji, Co-op, they also in a way being asked by the government to also not just invest in stock market and bond, but also in real economy, So they are doing things as per the blue bar that suddenly just emerged in 2025 under the Gear Up program too. So they are contributing to another layer of investment story in Malaysia, which is not just private sector, not just local companies, not just private FDI, but also public investment. And I was talking earlier about the trade and investment diversion. So a lot of companies now are adopting China plus one, or in fact, they are now talking about China plus many now. So they do this because they want to make sure the supply chain is safe, secure, resilient. We are no longer on a just-in-time supply chain. We are no longer on a lean inventory supply chain. We are on just-in-case, and I call it mean inventory. Kalau you kena hot sikit, build more inventory just to make sure kalau ada apa disruption in the supply chain, at least you have stock available. You do it. Of course, it's more cost, it's create redundancies, but it's needed for essentially security. And this is why I said, among other things, the industrial property is booming now because one of the in thing now is warehousing, logistics. You need it because of this shift and the shift is because ultimately people are, like in the case of America, quite clearly, they are sourcing less and less direct from China. They're looking at somewhere else. So this is the whole concept of China plus one or China plus many. You can see that in terms of the statistic that shows you a China share of total US import is dropping. In fact, now ASEAN has surpassed China as a major source of imports by US for all sorts of things. And because of that, we benefit through investment. So you can see not just Malaysia experiencing uptrend in imports of capital goods, i.e. investment is picking up. ASEAN also is seeing an increase in imports of capital goods. So investment cycle is happening right now, upcycle is happening right now. And of course, we move to the thing that causes all this, especially in terms of investment, that is the global trade uncertainties. So these are just index about trade policy uncertainty, largely about Trump and what he's going to do. I think at one time, my job every morning, bangun, check apa Trump buat and cakap malam tadi. It's very, very tiring, you know. Very tiring. Buka mata je, open phone, apa dia buat malam tadi. It's come to that level that you become obsessed with Trump, which is not very healthy. Thankfully, I've cut down on that. I come to a point where buka mata je, minum air dulu ke, makan kurma sepijik dulu instead of worrying about what Trump does and do, because it's getting a bit stupid at times. But it creates this problem, uncertainty. You know, uncertainty, because it changed the way America treat everyone and America deal with everyone. It's just total shift in the way America have relations with the rest of the world. So, and there's a lot of uncertainty because while they are positive, for example, even if it's controversial, but US is securing more and more trade deals with partners, so at least we can be guaranteed of a lower tariff than whatever spectacular numbers he's threatening to impose on us. And of course, US-China relation blow hot and cold, but at least right now it's cooler, temperature has gone down, there's a bit of a truce, so-called until October 2026, end of October 2026. I think it's deliberate also why they extend it for 1 year until end October 2026, because first Tuesday in November 2026 ada US election. So between now and then, dia tak nak lah apa-apa jadi. Because I think China is the only country in the world right now that can stand up to US. Tak takut, dia tak heran. US nak buat apa, I'm ready with my countermeasures and response. And I think we all know lah, China in particular has been squeezing US when US being naughty on them. They tighten on rare earth. They stop buying America's soybean. I just buy from Brazil, for example. So China can stand up to US, and Trump knows it. He's just bluffing. He don't know how to handle China now. At least between now until 2026, end of October 2026, aku just make sure nothing bad happened to my economy because China did something, because I need to win votes for the midterm election. So politician being politician. Uncertainty is still there. Habis reciprocal tariff issue, now we have to deal with product-specific tariffs. So benda ni, cerita ni tak habis lagi lah. Walaupun reciprocal tariff is something that is supposedly imposed on every imports from every country. Tapi there are exemptions. Certain product, for example, electronic, semiconductor. Why? Because he's thinking of a separate tariff on semiconductors. So there's an overhang here. So they're still uncertain. He already introduced tariff on certain products. Steel, iron, heavy trucks. I have a list I'll show you later. And then we still don't know what really is the end game between US and China. We're really not sure. Are they really going to, in the end, kiss and make up, come up with a trade deal? I don't know. This 1 year truce may be just time for them to buy time, to strategize and decouple or whatnot. You know, there's a lot of geopolitics going on right now, a lot of uncertainty. And there's also now the question about tariff, Trump tariff, ni legal ke? There has been few companies in US and industry association in US has brought this issue to the court. So the federal courts in US have kind of said that actually Trump tariff is illegal. So kalau illegal, why are you collecting tariff? You should return the money to the companies. reciprocal tariff trade deal ni you can koyak lah. But right now we are waiting for US Supreme Court to decide. So the question is, will the Supreme Court decide against or for Trump tariff? If we look at the decision of US Supreme Court since Trump came into office, it tend to favor Trump because majority of them are Republican appointed or Trump appointed judges anyway. So these people are telling kita kena demokrasi, our judicial system must be free of political influence and so on, blah blah blah. Dia orang pun 2 kali 5 aja. So this is just uncertainty. And then of course there's risk. The trade tension between US and specific countries pula. Dia ada, macam dengan Canada, dia bergaduh tak habis lagi. Walaupun it's next door neighbor, and the economic relationship between the two is so close, macam Johor, Malaysia, Singapore kind of thing lah. Adik-beradik tapi gaduh juga lah selalu. Tapi I don't know what is this problem with Canada, and Canada pun bengang dengan dia, so they're not talking now. So there's uncertainty about that. And the worst part I think right now is Trump cuba weaponize tariff untuk benda-benda yang tak ada kena-mena dengan trade. Sebagai contohnya, dia threaten BRICS yang kita nak jadi member ni. Kalau you cadang nak guna more of your own currency, you tak nak guna dollar, I will impose tariff on you. What does it got to do with trade? Tak ada. Pasal dia takut dollar dominance in global usage decline. So benda-benda macam he threatened or he raised tariff on countries that import oil from Russia. Because Russia still earlier was a bit reluctant about coming up with a ceasefire and peace deal with Ukraine. So he's using tariff on other things and nothing to do with trade now. So this is the weaponization of tariff also create a lot of uncertainty and risk to all of us. So panjang lebar, but this is essentially where we are now, at least with the trade agreement that we signed with US. We are not going to be charged 25%. 19%, I think not necessarily great. Ideally, we probably want to be as low as Singapore at 10%. But why Singapore 10%? Singapore have trade deficit with US. Kita ada trade surplus with US. So ada premium, ada penalty for having a trade surplus with US. That is the reason for US tariff. They believe the imposition of tariff will compress or reduce the trade deficit and bring a little bit more balance in global trade or something like that. But at least we see convergence in the tariff. And more importantly, our tariff is still lower than China's tariff. So that's why I think the trade diversion, the investment diversion out of China would still continue. I think that's key to sustain our investment upcycle story. In fact, kalau you tengok, you calculate effective reciprocal tariff is lower because, as I said, there are exemptions. But these exemptions also create uncertainty because it's good for us right now, especially our electronic sector, our semiconductor and all that, because that is our major exports to the US. And I think something like 60% of our exports of chips to US or global market actually come from US company operating here, the Intel and whatnot. So we are actually, as I said earlier, the beauty about Malaysia is we always make sure we stay current and relevant in global supply chain. Kalau global supply chain move to different new product, we are able to be part of it and we must be part of it. Kalau tidak, kilang tutup because we are not relevant, we're not producing the thing in demand anymore. So that shift is important. And electronics right now exempted from US reciprocal tariff. Tapi as I said, there is all this list of product-specific tariffs pula. So US have imposed on automobile, steel, aluminum, copper, pharmaceutical, kitchen cabinet, bathroom, vanities pun dia bubuh kat tarif. Timber, heavy trucks. But these are not our main products export to US. Our main is the one that I put arrow, that semiconductors and chip making equipment. I think that's our worry right now. There's still no decision on this. So this is an overhang for us. Of course, there are other stuff that also want to impose tariff. On the list, I must say, this list is getting longer and longer. It's getting longer and longer. It used to be less than half of the lengthwise before. Now they're double, more than double. There are more product being imposed. So create complication. It create complication. Very important lah, because we are a major, after Taiwan actually, we are the biggest source of semiconductor export to US, and we have, and US have a trade deficit with us. So there's a concern that because of the trade deficit, because we are a major source, US may be interested or motivated to impose semiconductor tariff on us. It's very important because right now we are going through a global upcycle in technology because of AI boom and all that. So chips are in demand. If there is a shock from semiconductor tariff imposed by US, then it could provide a downside risk to the current tech upcycle. The hot topic is this. I don't know whether it's still hot topic, but I took the trouble of reading MITI's statement in August and bothered myself to actually read essentially a legal document, the agreement on reciprocal tariff. One thing for sure is not reciprocal lah. Nothing reciprocal, because something like 60% of US export to Malaysia are zero tariff by Malaysia. Another 36, one-third is reduced tariff from what it was. So US got plum deal. Kita 12% je our export US got zero tariff. The rest still tariff at 19%. So it become an issue lah. Tapi to be honest, everybody face the same issue. So you are negotiating with US with literally a gun in your head. You tak negotiate, it not necessarily be 25%. It can be more. Penalty for don't want to negotiate or don't want to come to an agreement. So we are not negotiating on an equal basis. It's not a good place to be. So I have empathy for MITI negotiator. I think it's tough. And I heard from MITI people pun, even on US side also, they want penings, but Trump can overnight change his mind, say something stupid or crazy, and so they themselves is in a very difficult position. But they just want to show their big boss, I'm finalizing trade deal, because Trump is a showman, he love all this stuff. You saw what happened when he come to KL, right? Sign agreement, sign peace. Dia suka benda-benda macam tu. So under pressure, both sides, because of Trump. And then there are things that because of the agreement we have to do lah, which give the impression that we are putting our sovereignty at risk, so to speak. It's debatable. I think I mean I'll happy to share it with you later. You guys can read through. If you have question later to me, I mean, feel free. But I think the main issue is this lah, Article 5.1 of the agreement. It suggests that, can you imagine if the United States imposes a custom duty, quota, prohibition, fee, charge, and other import restrictions on a good or service of a third country? I like the way they put of a third country. It seems to me an euphemism for China. And consider such measure is relevant to protecting the economic and national security of the United States. The US, in a way, can notify such measure to Malaysia for the purpose of economic and national security alignment. Maknanya dia kata kita punya policy, especially on trade and foreign policy ni, kena align dengan US. They want us to take sides, so to speak. I think this is the one that's being debated right now. Patutkah kita all this while cakap kita neutrality apa semua, we are friends to everyone, enemy to no one kind of mantra, but this particular article in the trade agreement I think is quite onerous on us, and it creates this debate right now whether we are surrendering our sovereignty, our neutrality, our freedom in policy making, especially on trade and foreign policy, is now subject to US whims. So I think this is the debate right now lah. But I think MITI come up with statement on 29th of October in Parliament stating that there are, I suppose, it's not ironclad, so to speak, that is mandatory alignment. I think that's what MITI is trying to say. I cannot say anything more beyond we have to wait until when the time comes. Katakan during this 1 year trade truce between US and China, tiba-tiba things turn sour, US decide to do something on China, will US send that notification to Malaysia saying we are doing this? What are you going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? I think that's the test. Right now, I can't say anything. Kita kena tunggu when Article 5.1 is invoked, baru kita tahu. It's legal document anyway, right? So how? I mean, our government stance is it's not mandatory alignment. We have diplomatic space and flexibility to negotiate still with US because it depends on whether measures imposed by US on a third country, let's say it's really about China, let's be honest about this, I think it's just about China by and large, whether that means kita kena follow or we have room to argue that that is not our national economic security, that is your, it doesn't align with us, we don't have to follow you. Boleh ke tidak? I think that's the key thing to keep an eye on right now. Between now and let's say next 1 year, we see what happens. I cannot say anything more. But I think from MITI perspective, they also argue there's a benefit also in signing this deal. You look at the blue highlighted part here. US may positively take the agreement into consideration when deciding on actions under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act 1962. Ini kena-mena dengan semiconductor tariff that I said just now. So because we sign an agreement, we have an agreement with US on trade deal, walaupun US is still considering a separate semiconductor tariff, but because we are now, number one, have a trade deal with US, number two, as a result of this agreement, our relationship with US has been, according to MITI, upgraded to a comprehensive strategic partnership as opposed to comprehensive partnership previously. They just add the word strategic in the middle. I don't know, sounds big. But it means we are considered as a trusted partner in supply chain. And I guess in relation to electronics, they may give us they may even continue the exemption from tariff on our semiconductor, which I think would be the best case scenario right now and logical thing to do because, as I said, the bulk of investment in technology in Malaysia are done by US companies anyway. Even more so now with the DC stuff, the data centers, the AI, cloud infrastructure and so on. So we wait and see on this, but after the agreement with US, we assigned deal with China, with South Korea, and I think while we were busy dealing with US, we also have this parallel strategy to deepen trade diversions and trade diversification with other trade partners. So we are negotiating with EU. I think we have finalized talks, concluded talks with South Korea. We have started free trade agreement talks, negotiation with GCC, the Gulf countries cooperation, the Middle East, EFTA, a smaller part in Europe, we have concluded. And we must remember we have this existing multilateral trade agreement, CPTPP, RCEP. BRICS would be interesting to see because we are now partner countries, we are not members yet. But it would be interesting to see when I can understand why we need to look into all this because ultimately US is only 11% of our total trade. Macam Canada, Mexico lain lah. These are 50-60% of their trade. They have big stake when it comes to dealing with US. We are not so we have these other options to look at expanding our trade partners and trade deals with other parties. As far as economic impact of Trump 2.0, what I did is I trace or track global trade volume and global industrial output. I compared the period during Trump 1.0, 2017 to 2019, and compare with where we are now. Actually, when you look at the red line and blue line, the movement are the same, suggesting to me that the global economic situation should mirror what it was back then between 2017 and 2019. Slower growth aja, bukan recession. Because you look at the movement here, tracking. So this simple way of observing the impact, global impact of Trump 2.0 trade policies and tariff episodes with what happened in Trump 1.0. So because of that, we are looking at slower global growth. And I think these numbers are just for reference. I'm not going to go through them line by line. And I think I've mentioned earlier about Malaysia growth also would come off a bit, but not severely as initially feared. I mean, initially the fear was really global recession, but nowadays nobody talk about global recession anymore. I think late last year, early this year, yes, I'm confronted with that question. Are we going to go into recession? Sampai ada tanya pukul berapa, what date, hari apa, I don't know. Good luck with trying to figure that one out. And I think why global growth also still expected to continue, albeit slower, is central banks now are trying to support economy by cutting interest rates, including US Federal Reserve or the US Central Bank itself. Bank Negara pun dah cut 2.75% from 3%. Not a lot because we are not like Indonesia and Philippines. Bila US Central Bank raise interest rate, they orang pun literally follow. So the quantum of interest rate hike last time was larger. So when Fed start to cut interest rate, they tend to follow. For us, we are a bit more conservative in terms of movement in our interest rate. So I don't expect much move, especially not when the economy is not going into sharp slowdown or deep recession. So I think Bank Negara would maintain the overnight policy rate at 2.75% next year. FX, I think Trump is causing and wanting US dollar to be weak because he is doing things that technically make US export uncompetitive through tariff. So how to offset that? Weaken the currency to make US export. Because he wants to boost US export, but you are making it costly to produce, manufacture in US and export and ship to the rest of the world. How do you offset that? Weak US dollar. So this, I think, is what's happening right now. You see ringgit pun dah, I think, appreciate about 8% against US dollar this year. Last 3 years, we were in terrible situation. At one time, people are invoking the quote that was made famous in 1998, see you at 5. Meaning to say they expect ringgit to be 5 ringgit against dollar. Okay lah, we almost there, 475, 480. Scary juga when you look at that situation. But now, ringgit is strengthening. We are expecting ringgit to strengthen to 410 by end of this year. It's already 415, 414 now. At one time, it was as low as below 413. Tak jauh dah dari 410 our year-end target. And we do expect ringgit to go 4 by the end of next year. So you can have a look at this forecast by our FX research team in Singapore on the exchange rate, if you are interested to plan your holiday or stuff like that. Budget 2026, I think maybe there are 3 key things. I would put it into 3 buckets when it comes to looking at the key element intipati budget 2026. First is fiscal reforms continue. I think the government in a way is obligated under Fiscal Responsibility Act to cut down our budget deficit to GDP ratio to 3%. So we have been going through this process since 2022. At that time, our fiscal deficit or budget deficit was 5.5% of GDP. I think this year target 3.8%. Next year, 3.5%. The aim is to hit the 3% obligated by the Fiscal Responsibility Act by 2027, if not 2028 latest. So there is that commitment, and because of that commitment, whether you like it or not, there are things that has happened and will happen on tax and expenditure, especially subsidies, and it's already happening. It's obviously not popular. I think the last year, this year, there has been a lot of new taxes being introduced also. And then obviously the main issue is SST reviews. The rate go up, the coverage expanded, include more goods and services. But I think from next year onward, the focus would be on tax compliance. So my advice to companies, including PKNS companies, make sure your book is in order, because LHDN custom would be very aggressive on auditing. They will be very aggressive. They will go after everyone. I mean, not being mean, but I think I have a very simple argument on this why. government need to raise revenue because operating expenditure pun keep growing. The rule is government must make sure every single cent of its operating expenditure is covered by revenue. Dia tak boleh borrow actually untuk cover operating expenditure. To me, from a simple finance, that's bad economics. If you have to start borrowing to cover operating expenditure, nak bayar gaji, nak bayar pension, nak bayar hutang pun you nak hutang untuk bayar hutang, that is bad. Itu simbol company atau negara yang menuju ke arah kebankrapan. Itu je. So the rule is very clear. But to me, if you introduce new tax, you increase tax rate, but you are loose on compliance and enforcement, businesses and people will be tempted to evade tax because there's way to do it. So you must strengthen. So that's why I think one of the initiatives is e-invoice. They're working on it. And I think it will go live fully in 1st July 2026 to basically have a better system to monitor and to audit. Expenditure saving quite clear. The major item is subsidy. We have had electricity, we have had diesel, we have had it with what was it? RON 95 baru buat. We have had also the removal of certain subsidy that government argues or say is temporary, chicken and eggs. So I expect going forward, tengoklah benda-benda macam cooking oil, LPG, the cooking gas tu, sugar subsidy. I mean, you increase tax on health ground for the alcoholic and tobacco, excise duties in budget 2026. My view is why you still have sugar subsidy. The reason why you introduced sugar subsidy a few years back was global sugar price was high. The government have to support the sugar producer lah. Kalau tidak, they will not produce sugar, subsidize sugar, and there will be outcry about lack of sugar, just like the outcries over lack of chickens and egg last time. The government have to subsidize to increase or stabilize production to make sure availability. So I think this is the thing to watch. And interestingly, September this year, government passed the government procurement bill. So the government also is looking to tighten up on its spending because we know the stories about leakages and wastages in government spending, which I think need to be plugged. Other than that, continue to support domestic demand as per what is listed there, and longer term, the budget is about economic restructuring and transformation. I think everybody knows about this, especially in terms of high value, high growth area. I think the reason also the government need to keep its books in order is government debt sticky up there. It's close to 65% ceiling. We actually need to keep cutting deficit to make sure we don't bust this limit. And of course, like I said, certain element of government operating expenditure, bila you look at the chart, you draw the chart, dia naik bukan linear, dia naik exponential. It's rising fast. Retirement charges, debt service charges. So this one must be covered by revenue, bukan by borrowing some more. So I think this is a challenge the government have to deal with. And of course, the big news is petroleum-related revenue. The government, this is the gravy train that is kind of stopping now. This is the cookie jars where the government cannot keep putting its hand into it, taking the cookies anymore. The revenue is falling. Whether it's because of crude oil price is not expected to go $100+ per barrel or whatnot. And we all know the story about Petronas versus Petros. So Petros is taking over easily 20 to 25% of Petronas business in the gas segment. It will have a big impact on revenues, Petronas revenue, and it will have a big impact on petroleum-related revenue of the government. So ni cerita ni dah tak boleh pakai dah. That's why the government have to increase other source of income, especially tax, because this is predominantly dividend from Petronas. It's a non-tax revenue. So dividend should be based on profitability, right? So if profitability is down, your dividend payout will be affected. So I think this is where the government is coming from. That's why the government is focusing on tax. SST unpopular, but I took the opportunity to compare SST with GST. Now, as of last year, the amount collected from SST dah sama dengan what they collected from GST. Masa GST was on a full year running basis, 2016, 2017. And as a percentage of GDP now, it's catching up with GST ratio of 3+% of GDP. It's already surpassed 2% of GDP, something that it never ever achieved historically. So the government need to top up this to counter the drop in petroleum-related revenue. I've talked about subsidy, more will come. I dengar macam RON 95 ni, mungkin dia akan turunkan kota tu 300 liter per month tu macam over sangat. Kata pakai tak sampai 100. I mean majority lah. Saya pun tengok, I have over past 2 months pun barely 100 liter because I work from home also. So I don't travel that much. And then you think about me, my wife, my kid ada kota, tak pakai, kota underutilized. Maybe the government will look into reviewing that. But I think you must remember the original intention with RON 95 subsidy rationalization is dia nak exclude not just non-citizen but the higher income group as well. So I think eventually they will make use of padu system tu. They will detect siapa yang high income. They will also match it with your consumption pattern as per the current quota. They will make adjustment. Tapi I rasa benda ni mungkin after general election lah kot, not so soon. Of course, budget 2026 is the first budget for the 13 Malaysia Plan period 2026-2030. I will not go through this. I tak hafal lagi benda ni. Banyak. But there are key macroeconomic targets set over the next 5 years. But the economist in me would look at several things under 13 Malaysia Plan. One is growth target, obviously 5% per annum, next 5 years for the whole economy. It will be underpinned largely by consumer spending again, steady growth of 5%. Of course, there's also the move to boost investment and so on. Economy will be driven by services, manufacturing and construction sectors. And I will also look at this. If you want the economy to grow 5%, driven by 5% growth in consumer spending, income must grow. No growth in income, no 5% growth in consumer spending and 5% in economic growth. I think this is the big challenge because the government wants to raise the GDP share of labor income, our income, to 40% by 2030 from around 1/3 right now. Over a short period of time, I think that's going to be quite challenging task. All this target comes in lah when you look, if you bother to read through the 13 Malaysia Plan, this median monthly wages, mean monthly household income, you want to raise it. And of course, sustain the investment upcycle. We are on the third investment upcycle from my analysis. The first one was the late 80s until pre-1998 Asian financial crisis. That was because of 1986 Promotion of Investment Act, together with tension between US and Japan at that time. The situation was the same as now. US versus China now, US versus Japan last time. Japan was having a lot of big trade surplus with US. US tak happy. They make a lot of noise. It would have been a lot worse if Trump was president back then, but they still worry about it. So what happened is, they come to a deal. What was the deal? The deal is Japan must appreciate its currency by 100% in a space of 2 years. So that means Japan cannot profitably produce in Japan and export to the rest of the world. So they have to go out, and we benefit. The FDI from Japan, banyak masa itu. Sampai, you know that part of Shah Alam is literally a Panasonic town, right? So we benefit. Timing was perfect. The second one was after global financial crisis, 2008. We come up with new economic model, the economic transformation program, so on and so forth. So that boosts investment. And now, with the political semblance of political stability after a very interesting period of 2018 to 2022, when we have, 4 or 5 prime ministers and 4 or 5 government, that stability enabled the government to focus on policies. So they come up with Madani Economy Framework, NETR, NIMP, NSS, JSSZ, and so on. So we are seeing another round of investment upcycle in terms of the rise in investment to GDP ratio. But I think the other thing to keep an eye on, if you want people income to grow a lot, I think productivity is key. Labour productivity is key. I think this is a challenge for us because historically government have targets about labour productivity tapi tak pernah achieve pun, always miss target. So we need to focus on this as well. Government also want the economy to be more innovative, and obviously one key metric here is R&D share of GDP. We are very low, 1% thereabout. If you look at developed advanced economy grouping, the R&D expenditure to GDP ratio is anywhere around 3 to 4%. So we are just going for 2.5%. So I think this is also a challenge because right now, I think something like 60% of R&D in our economy is by public sector. Only 40% by private sector. Going forward, we want the mix to split to be a 70% private and 30% public. So does our company want to do R&D, innovate? Interesting to watch. All this is important because we want to boost our competitiveness. If you look specifically this chart, Global Competitiveness Ranking Index, we want to be top 20. And I think what is very interesting, we have seen how our competitiveness deteriorate over a long period of time. Between the high of number 10 in the world, 2010, to the low of 34 in 2024. Our competitiveness dropped. Why? Because we are not productive. We don't innovate. Why? Because we love what I call the 3 chips. Apa 3 chips tu? Cheap labor, cheap foreign worker, subsidy, cheap undervalued currency. That cannot be the basis for us to go forward anymore. And that's a message from the government. So that's why they're very strict on hiring foreign workers, increasing the cost to detract. Kalau kita nak hire foreign workers, hire good quality, expat, high skill people lah, not continue depending on cheap foreign workers. Subsidy, as you know, is going to be a thing. I don't think the government want to totally remove subsidy, but they want to make it more means tested lah. Siapa yang eligible gets, yang can afford not to pay, can afford to pay unsubsidized costs, pay. Ringgit, our view, should be strengthening. So exporters cannot rely on cheap ringgit for their competitiveness. So, you know, the 3 chip has caused our competitiveness to drop. Very simple. Very simple. Last part of my presentation, I think I bila start cakap memang sonok. Selangor, I mean, to me, I look at some statistics on Selangor's contribution to the economy. At Maybank, when we do our KPI to what you call see our performance, we use words like high performer, core contributor, key contributor kind of thing. So I think Selangor belongs to that upper end of the KPI when it comes to performance with regards to its contribution to the economy. You know, it's a high performer, core contributors. I mean, obviously the largest economies in terms of states. Also in terms of growth, certainly during the 12 Malaysia Plan period, it is the fastest growing economy among all the states, 6.3%. For the next 5 years, growth will be a bit less, about 5% per annum, but it's still above national average. But I think the message from these 2 charts, when you look at GDP growth by states, it's not about Selangor is lower than now, you know. It's more of my view. The government want to reduce the growth gaps between the states. You see how Selangor 6.3%, Sabah 3.1%. The difference is 100%, you know, double. So if you look at the aim, we're going to narrow the growth performance between the states. So maybe policy by government, federal government, focus more on, I suppose, the less developed states lah. Selangor, I think, is capable to run on its own. But nonetheless, I think because of Selangor's large share of the economy, I mean, it's also register other good performance in terms of GDP per capita. I think it will continue to exceed national average. And I think in terms of its share of sectors, probably Selangor is not a main player in the country's primary sectors like agriculture and mining, But what I find very interesting about Selangor is it is strong in the related downstream industries and sectors beyond agriculture, for example. Its share of Malaysia agriculture is less than 5%. Tapi its shares of related manufacturing that are related to agriculture, 48%, vegetable and oil animal fats, food processing and beverage. Maknanya downstream processing, value-added product, Selangor is a key player. Also in related services, wholesale, retail, F&B, accommodation, they use agriculture products in terms of food and all that. Why? Because you got income. So this is, I think, the key thing to look at as far as Selangor is concerned. And I think there are opportunities within this segment, particularly from the food security, because the government needs to focus on this. Our self-sufficiency ratio on some important or in essential food item is bad. We have to import. I heard kelapa pun we have to import from Indonesia now, tak cukup. So it's kind of strange for economy that have lands, not able to produce enough food, that we have to depend on imports. Our import bills now, food import bills now dah easily 100 billion ringgit a year, closing on that if not there yet. So I think need to look into issue of food security. Selangor may not be involved in the upstream, but can benefit from the downstream processing of food manufacturing and so on. Definitely a key player in the country's manufacturing, services and construction. Basically the top guy in town, so to speak. But I think it's also important in terms of export. It's the third largest state in terms of Malaysia's share of Malaysia's total exports after Penang and Johor. Why? Because obviously gateway thing, Port of Klang is in Selangor, just as Johor have Port Tanjung Pelepas, Penang have obviously the key industries in terms of electronics hub. But I think what is interesting about Selangor really is population, demography. It is the largest state in terms of population. So to me, it's a big consumer market based on demography. Especially when you look at the natural increase in population in terms of numbers. Natural increase mean birth minus death. So Selangor have the largest number in terms of net birth. So population will also be supported by natural increase. Ni tak masuk migration lagi, people from other state hijrah datang ke kerja kat KL atau sekitar Selangor yang duduk in Selangor. So I think that there is that natural demographic factor that will support Selangor's economic growth over the medium to longer term. And when you look at the dependency ratio, Selangor is low on the lower half in terms of the dependency ratio, meaning to say the ratio of children and elderly as a percentage of working population is low. So the working population is not overly burdened by dependence. So they have more disposable income to spend. So I think that's the economic logic of this chart, which means the outlook for Selangor consumer activities or spending is good. It is a big, and this strengthens the big consumer market nature of Selangor. And of course, the demographic dynamics coupled with cost of living issues, I think among other things would always create that vibes, that underlying factors or driver for demand and supply for affordable housing in particular. So I think when you look at the breakdown of pendapatan and perbelanjaan isi rumah in Selangor, I think obviously the largest item is on things related to housing after the essential like food and beverages, as well as restoran dan perkhidmatan penginapan. I think this is interesting. It also showed you have the disposable income to eat out. Betul tak? It's not an essential spending, it's discretionary spending. If 20% of your spending in state goes into this segment, that means there's a lot of, you can afford to, there's money, and that helps bolster the commercial activities, retail activities in Selangor. So this is the dynamics. Affordable housing is very important because this is Bank Negara study in I can't remember 2020 or 2022. Basically, with the exception of Melaka, the house price in all other states, including Selangor, are considered seriously unaffordable or severely unaffordable. This is based on house price divided by annual income lah. Anything more than 3 times unaffordable, on various degree, whether it's seriously or severely. So I think obviously a key what you call things with regards to PKNS, I'm not trying to advise you, you probably know this, is to look into the issue of affordable housing. I think what I find interesting is planned supply of low-cost house and low-cost flat ni macam next to nothing, dah tak ada dah. I was wondering whether it's because cost factors. Dah macam doesn't make sense anymore. So you got to move to not so much talk about low cost, it's more affordable lah, the notion of affordable. Because I think businesses that I met, most of them complain or raise the issue of cost of doing business, cost of compliance, regulatory compliance and all that has gone up. So it's not that easy to do business now. And the other thing, I think Dato' we had that with gentlemen here saja, kita cakap tentang industrial property, right? I find it very interesting when I look at Selangor State. The bangunan bukan kediaman on non-residential properties, contribution and growth is very strong now. So much so that they are surpassed residential, they have surpassed civil engineering. So this is, logically, is where the business is. And relate to what I said earlier about FDI, about investment upcycle, about trade diversions, investment diversions. So that's why. And I think, I suspect it's not just because of office and retail. I think it's really more and more industrial lands, warehouse, logistic infrastructures, and stuff like that. Towards the end of my presentation, I think when you look at things within 13 Malaysia Plan and Budget with regards to major transport infrastructure, industrial parks, Selangor is still in the picture. To me, when you look at transport infrastructure, whether it's rail, port, airports, highways, road, Selangor is singularly the most connected, well-connected state of the country. So it can be a hub. You think about ECRL, kalau siap nanti pun, you are connected now, better connected to the East Coast states also. All this while, you are very well connected to the west coast of Peninsula, from Penang all the way to Johor. Now you're going to have another extension of economic connectivity. So I think that would support the vibrancy of Selangor state economy. And then of course, flood mitigation, water-related infrastructure, to me is very important. If you're going to have more industrial parks, you're going to build more of this, among other things, you're going to make sure utility is there. Otherwise, how are you going to get people? And I think flood is very important because ultimately it protects the value of investment in the real estate. Kalau tak, the cost, the property will not be attractive. Even if you have to be there, you have to incur the cost of insuring against natural disaster, against flood and all that. So I think flood mitigation is important. Water infrastructure is now, I think, the next big thing in our infrastructure story. It's not about road, ports, rail, apa semua dah. It's moving towards that, together with power, I suppose, because again, same thing, as economy grow, as more and more industrial parks are being built, we're going to see more demand for the basic infrastructure, especially utilities. So I've spoken long enough. I think it's good for me to pause here and happy to take any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning. Thank you very much for that very insightful presentation. I have 2 questions. My first one would be, how should consumer-facing sectors like retail position ourselves to ride the domestic tailwinds despite the global uncertainty? Number 1. Number 2, if you had to bet on one domestic catalyst that could outperform the expectation in the next 18 months, what would that be and why? Thank you.
First question, I think when it comes to retail, while there are policies to support overall income, generate jobs and so on, I think consumers these days, they are really looking for value for money. So I think any retail project, whatever, must understand that. The value for money need not necessarily be cheap, but you must understand your market segments, obviously, depending on location, community, the level income. I think that's why I said earlier, data is important, increasingly, to understand the market, the potential and so on. So I think, and I'm noticing, for example, quite more and more property developer that I know of, where those private ones that are listed in the stock market, they are setting up the macam apa orang kata, data analytics and AI unit to really look. They themselves have lots of data because of the historical development and all that. So they perhaps can see what works, what doesn't work, number one. And number two, I think they also try to understand shifting dynamics in terms of consumer preferences. Maybe certain business not that good because they are being challenged by, I suppose, e-commerce and stuff like that. But maybe the opportunity is in warehousing lah. Not so much you need, but you support the warehousing business, because if e-commerce is going to grow so much, the fulfillment, the logistic aspect of that retail is more important. So I don't think I can give you a definitive answer, but I think you really need to understand the market you're going to. I think that's very important. So kind of research is everything. The second one is about the domestic catalyst that can outperform. That's a tough one. And I'm not a betting person. Haram. It's Friday anyway. Nak cakap topik tu. But, okay, you got me there. Give me some time to think and I'll get back to you. I'll be honest. Good question. If you stump me, that's a good question.
Yeah. I saw one of the graphs just now towards the end, pasal loans growth by Maybank. And it seems that the growth of loans has dropped in 2020, end of 24, 25.
Oh,
And I was wondering whether this is something that I hear from my sales. Isha and Fadli will tell me, a slow market soft. What is your take on this? Is there a drop in the demand for houses? That's why there is a drop in the loan growth?
I think to some extent there is some moderation in demand. I would argue one of the trends that I'm observing, especially with the younger generation, how do I put it? The word I use for it is they are asset light. They're not crazy about doing big capex, necessarily owning car and buying a house. They're not into it. They're less and less into it. So I call them the asset light generation. Our generation, we are asset accumulator or builder, whatever you want to call it, right? Kita invest, kita risau pasal anak kita tak ada rumah, kita beli untuk dia orang. Maybe that's the reason. Maybe I notice also because of that, probably the more likely trend for the younger generation is they are asset light. They use more public transportation. They don't mind riding Grab kind of thing, using e-hailing, private hailing and all that, p-hailing. And I think either they stay with parents or they're more of a tenant, renter type of people. So, and the issue is also very simple demographics of household formation. If household formation is slowing, the demand for houses also will technically slow, right? Because they are not rushing to get married and raise family. Even if they marry and raise, they are not going to go for big family. I mean, my cousin just had an argument with her son for getting a third children, and you know that the kid is feeling the cost pressure of additional baby after having 2 kids already. This is reality. This is reality. So my view when I try to extrapolate what's happened on the ground to the broad economy is you must check what's happening. The real story is a microcosm of the big picture story. And I think these are the structural changes that are happening that can affect property demand over the long term. And think about our population structure now is considered aging, because I think, I don't know whether it's 9 or 12 states in the country already have more than 7% of population above 65. So that's into aging. Not age yet, and definitely not super age like Japan, for example. But we are entering that stage already. And that will also affect demand for property, right? Whether less demand or whether the preference is for smaller units, age-friendly homes, and kind of things like that. So like I said, going back to what I said, you need to understand the data, or what's happening on the ground, and how does that, I suppose, influence your strategy going forward. Yeah. Okay lah, the question about what can domestic catalyst that can, maybe I'm biased because I'm more of a financial market economist. Stock market, because our stock market is underperforming relative to what's happening globally. It's not even up year to date. So if you look from that perspective, when things go sour with the developed US market or Japanese market or Korean market, the money may actually flow into our market because there's still value. We are underperformer. If you want to see upside, want to make money in equity market, you go for the one that's lagging. So that would create also positive vibe, sentiment on the ground in terms of wealth creation through increase in share prices. And that can actually benefit consumer spending, which is currently is our main driver of economic growth, and that can lift our economy. So probably a very biased way of looking at things, because one thing I start to notice is that our stock market is underperformer compared with obviously US market and all that. So if there is going to be a shift in liquidity of fund, meaning they take the money off the table from where they already make the money, but these people job is to make money and then not to sit on the funds. So they will move the money to where the market has not gone up. And I think one of the potential is our market, together with, like I said earlier, EPF had a good problem. Money is still coming in, 10 billion per month. Nak letak mana? Stock market is 40% of their portfolio. So that is where a potential, I suppose, big catalyst, domestic catalyst.
If there are no any other questions, I would like to say thank you very much to Encik Suhaimi for the insightful presentation. Next, I would like to invite Yang Bahagia Dato' Mahmud bin Ambas to present a token of appreciation to Encik Suhaimi. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we will now proceed with a group photo. So kindly remain seated as our photographer will take a picture from the stage.